Thanks for joining us again today. My name is Ty Christensen, and I'm the co-founder and chief diversity officer for Arrive Home, which is a social enterprise that facilitates home ownership through our National Down Payment Assistance Program and our special purpose credit programs. Thanks so much for joining us again today. As always, I want to thank our sponsor, PCV Mercor, which is a nationwide real estate valuations management company. We appreciate your continued sponsorship of this podcast and the support you give us each month. Today, my guest is my friend, Charles Lowery. He's the Senior Policy Director at National Housing Conference. He's worked in legislative and regulatory policy for over 20 years, including 5 years as the Director of Fair Lending for the NAACP. He also co-chairs the Credit and Lending Workstream of the Black Homeownership Collaborative, which aims to increase Black homeownership throughout our country. So first and foremost, thank you, Charles. Thank you for joining us today, my friend. I'm so happy you're here.
Thank you. Thank you, Ty.
You're welcome.
So
we're going to dive right into the challenging landscape for Black Americans in this country. And to be quite honest with you, when I was preparing for this conversation with you, I was really hopeful that when I pulled the updated data from the Census and Federal Reserve for Black homeownership numbers, that they would have increased after 2021 and 2022. They did increase a little bit, but unfortunately not very much. So let's just jump right in and get to the data before we start our conversation. So in 2021, the US home ownership rate increased to 65.5% for all Americans. Of that 65.5%, white Americans have a 73% home ownership rate, while Black Americans have a 43% home ownership rate. So we've got a 30-point disparity there. Per the Federal Reserve, white Americans make up 84% of total American wealth, but only make up 60% of the population, whereas Black Americans make up 4% of the total American wealth, but we make up 13% of the population. And then finally, the white American household median wealth is $187,000 compared to the Black American median household wealth of $14,000. And the highest the Black home ownership rate has ever been was back in 1980, and that was at 44.4%. So needless to say, we are still in challenging times. And yes, a lot of it has to do with redlining and Jim Crow laws, et cetera, et cetera. But let's just be honest, from 1980 to 2023, that's 43 years.
Right.
It's a long time. So why do you personally feel that the Black home ownership rate has not increased since 1980?
Wow, Ty, that's a tough question. I mean, I think I've been working in this area for over 25 years. I've worked in government, I've worked in the advocacy community, I've worked with the NAACP, and then also with the mortgage industry in terms of with the origination side as well as the servicing side. And I think that the problem is, on one hand, is pretty simple, and on the other hand, I think pretty complex. I think that the challenge to home ownership, the fear, the ideas, the miscommunication or misinformation about needing 20% down, right, as opposed to the 3% down that someone can get for an FHA or other loan. I think that ties into the problem. I think that there's a ongoing sense of employment, what being employed and having and education, right? Being able to be educated, being able to be employed, being able to have a good credit score, right? And those things have been challenges for our community for such a long time. The recent FHFA initiative to include rent payments, right, in terms of qualifying for a mortgage, taking those into consideration for your credit score, I think that's a big improvement. But I just see that that history of discrimination. And I wanted to just mention, the Color of Law book that Richard Rothstein
Yes.
did is such an amazing book to lay the foundation for some of these problems. When you think about the GI Bill and how many millions or thousands of Black GIs weren't able to benefit from that. There are just so many things interwoven into our history in this country that I think have led us to this point. And I think we have to acknowledge that and then figure out how to move forward from there.
Oh, I love that you bring up that GI Bill, because I was on a panel last month, and I had a whole segment about the Great Migration, which, as you know, was moving from east to west,
Yes.
and the government giving 20 million acres of land away for free. So there was something like 1.5 million Americans that only had to pay a small filing fee to be able to acquire 40 acres of land for free from the government.
Right.
But of those 1.5 million Americans, 1,300 were Black.
Wow.
Only 1,300. And I equated it to the show Yellowstone. I don't know if you've seen the show Yellowstone, but it's about the building of the frontier, etc. And he was able to acquire this large parcel of Montana land back in 1883. Well, fast forward to 2023, and you see how that one man set his family up for wealth upon wealth, owning all this beautiful land right outside of Yellowstone.
Right.
We as a community were not given the same advantage. To your point with the GI Bill, the suburbs were built upon white Americans, right? And we were redlined from those communities, and we were not able to access loans for those communities as well. And that has just really set us back. And moving on to your point about housing and education, what can we do as a community to increase housing education among Black Americans? Because you're right, that 20% stigma is still out there. Additionally, I do have a lot of friends and family members that have worked really, really hard to save a down payment for their home, but then they buy the home, they use all their reserves for the home, and then they have no money once they move into
no money, right?
And then when you don't have savings, it turns every single unexpected expense into a crisis situation. And that's where the non-sustainability of home ownership in our community comes.
Exactly.
So what do we need to do to bring more education to our fellow Black Americans about housing?
I think that's such an important point. The Black Homeownership Collaborative is really working to create resources and to work with others. So we have charts and information on the website that shows that you don't need the 20% down, because when you go on the internet, when you try to plug in the numbers, they don't give you the lower numbers, right? They want to give you the 5%, 10%, 20%, 30%. And so I think that the education that comes from getting our community connected to housing counselors, what I really see, Ty, is their initiatives like the Home Ownership, the Home Improvement Initiative Act, is really being presented by Congress to reintroduce to Congress as a way to help bring affordable homes, to the forefront of what we need. But we have to tie policy to actual what's happening on the ground. And on the ground, our community, like if you were a child that experienced someone losing their home to foreclosure, right, during the housing crisis, right, you don't really think that's available to you. If you are a home buyer and there are lots of white realtors and white loan officers you're dealing with, and you don't see yourself with those people. So mirroring the communities that are served is what we need as well from the industry, right? So it's like putting the pieces in place, the education and home ownership needs of the borrower and the credit needs, et cetera, working with credit housing counselors, working with companies that are fair, right, in terms of their offering of loan products and really reaching these communities, and special purpose credit programs and things that are out are a step in that direction. But then we have to just really work with the small supply, or the low supply of affordable homes, and the supply of homes that's out there. The fact that there are companies that are buying up single family homes, and they're being rental, and
Yes.
we need to deal with that issue. How do people get out of renting into home ownership, right? If they're stuck in those situations. So
Yes.
it's like a complex problem, but the 3by30.org, I want to mention that our 3by30.org website, and we're really trying to build that up. We have a second anniversary event coming up in Memphis in May. We really want to use that as an opportunity to, despite the rising mortgage interest rates, despite the less supply of homes,
Mm.
we have to keep fighting to increase those numbers, right? We need to work. Dr. Martin Luther King and the Fair Housing Act back in 1968, and all the efforts that he put into working towards fairness and less discrimination, and how he found the housing area as something that was really important to him. We
Mhm.
can't give up on that dream to really increase home ownership. So
Oh,
I don't,
Charles,
I
I
don't,
love so much of what you just said. Honestly, I could go off forever about but you bring up so many things that are so important, because you're right. If you even go back to Dr. King's efforts to helping to advance the Fair Housing Act, which unfortunately did not get passed until after he passed away. So he was not able to see that. But the effort that he put in way back then, knowing that that was a critical part to the wealth creation of communities, and he wanted that for the Black community. And to just see where we are now, it's kind of depressing when you think about it. That was what, 80 something years ago? And
right.
we still haven't even reached the 50% mark, and even just when you were talking about when you want to go into these communities and assist our Black community members, but yet you're sending in white real estate officers, you're sending in white loan officers who may
Right,
be
appraisers, right? Yeah.
appraisers, right? Who are not comfortable in our community, right? Who don't
Right.
know about the neighborhoods that we live in, and may have some unconscious bias associated with some of our neighborhoods, right?
Right.
So do you feel that diversifying the mortgage industry and bringing in more people of color, younger people of color, older people of color, all along the spectrum, do you feel like that can actually lead to more Black homeowners?
I think it can. I think that having um, more diversity in the mortgage industry and in the realtor space, as well as loan officers, I think that really does make a difference. But I also think that we want to um, sort of share our cultural experience with the white loan officer, right? So that they know that with this community, which is an important community in terms of doing business with, that they understand what that community needs. Just like the Hispanic community or Asian community, we need to just bring that knowledge and stuff across the mortgage industry, so that the industry and lenders and banks and financial institutions see that this is the future of America, is the Black home buyer, the home buyer of color, right? So
Yes.
but that representation, I think, is so important, and we really need to have that more diversity within the industry too, as well.
Not
So
agree more. So
yeah.
last question I ask all my guests.
Okay.
You could go back in time and tell your younger self something that was going to be critical, a great piece of advice that you could give your younger self, what would that piece of advice be that would help to assist your older self?
Yeah, I think that that's a tough question, Ty. I got to think about that. I think that I would just focus on trying to identify what work you like to do, what you love to do, because I found it took me until my 40s, Ty, to really find the industry and find this work. And I was able to tie my my legal background with my economics background, right? And I had so many friends and colleagues and, from school that had found areas as lawyers, for example, that were areas of passion for them. And then they were comfortable in working in those spaces. And I was searching and searching, and I finally found this area. And so I want people, because then you don't feel like you get up in the morning and the drudgery of going to work. If it's something you have passion about, I don't care what it is, but if you're passionate about it and like it, and you can be a lifelong learner, right?
Yeah.
And you can grow and change and enjoy life in that way. That makes sense. That's what
Yeah. Oh, I haven't heard that one yet. And I love it because you're right. When your work is your passion, you never work a day in your life, right? I think of my husband. He's wanted to be an architect since he was 4 years old, when his mom bought him a little set of Lincoln logs. And he would spend hours building homes out of these Lincoln logs. And he knew at that age that this is what I want to do. And even though he has a lot of work on his plate, he really does enjoy designing homes, and he thinks about it all the time, and he constantly has all these different ideas, and his face brightens up when he does it. And if you find something you're passionate about, yes, it's still work, but it's work that you enjoy.
It's work that you enjoy. And so you can get up in the morning and not feel the sort of a drudgery or a disappointment or but you can be excited or interested, and then that'll pull you through the day and every other day and every week. And so that's what I wish I had been able to figure that out sooner, but I found this area, and so I'm pleased now.
Well, we are pleased that you joined us today, Charles, my friend. Thank you so much for making time for us. I really appreciate it. I know how busy you are, so this really does mean a lot to me that you were able to
Thank you, Ty. You're one of my favorite people, and I so enjoy being able to be with you on this and talk to you more. So
well, thank you, Charles. And thank you for watching today. We appreciate your time as well. And we will see you guys next month. Bye.